is none other than Jammal. Welcome to the Global Freedom Party, my friend.
Hey guys, Andy. Hey Chris, how are you guys? Good to see you.
Good to see you, mate. Good to see you. I hope you didn't mind the big rap that we give you, but I do think that the credit is due. You've done such a phenomenal job, and you continue to. And again, what I love most about you not only is your knowledge wide and on point, but I love how you often just talk about action. You're talking about what needs to happen and what people can do, which is so empowering. So again, I want to give you a big shout out and a big thank you for all the work that you've done.
No, look, it's my pleasure. I hope I can live up to that opening. But no, look, that's what I'm all about. It's all about sort of bringing answers to people and giving them tangible tools. I mean, we've got plenty of commentators, but I think people really want to hear how they can actually change the system.
Absolutely. And Joel, you used to be did I hear right when you used to be a bricklayer or a concreter?
So I've been working in construction for the last 9 years before 2020. And I'd eventually got a white-collar job as an assistant development manager in property development. But yeah, I did start off in school and, working on construction sites, bricklaying, landscaping, steel tying, pouring concrete. I mean, I did all the hard jobs, but obviously eventually I did end up getting a job in the office as well.
Were you a bit of a pest on the building site talking about politics?
Mate, everyone's a pest, but I kept to myself with the politics because of these great things, which the amount of podcasts that I listened to that educated me, it was like another degree I got under my arm just from listening to, Jordan Peterson, all the intellectual dark web people over the course of 2016 to 2019.
So good, so good. Well, look, as I mentioned, you've done so much for Australia specifically. And again, we want to thank you a lot. We're going to give you the floor, my friend, and then we're going to tie back in and ask you some questions.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. I'm looking forward to it. So as Andy said before, guys, yes, I'm based in Australia. I'm actually the face and working behind Turning Point Australia, which is an American brand which we've brought to Australia so that we can actually turn the country around. The last 2 years have been absolute madness. A lot of people have been, the analogy I use is it's someone that's getting beaten up, except the person that's being beaten up has their eyes covered, their hands bound, and they just want answers. Who's beating me up? Why are they beating me up? How can I fight back? And over the course of the last 2 years, I've tried to provide those answers. A little bit of background, what threw me into this, as I said before, I was in construction for 9 years, but the government had other plans for me. I lost my job due to the lockdowns. A lot of funding with the banks ended up getting tightened up, and I got made redundant. It wasn't the mandates that got me. It was redundancy which ended up getting me because of the lockdown. So I tried to be that canary in the coal mine, warning people this is only going to get worse. So from July 2020 to today, a year and a half, it's really been my goal to really help people wake up and arm them with skills as to how they can enact change in their democracy. This isn't something I just started learning the last year and a half. I had been studying and following politics as a hobby on the side from following the American politics. And I think a lot of people have found it really valuable to see how their democracy works. And this is ultimately what the problem is. Why are we in a situation where a pandemic can completely throw everything out of whack? Why is it that our government officials no longer listen to us? Why is it that we can't get what we want and our representatives don't listen to us? Well, it's really quite simple. And if I could use this as an example, if you look at the petitions we sign, the petitions we sign right now in Australia, the biggest one we've signed during this pandemic was 309,000 signatures. It was that the jab rollout must abide by the Nuremberg Code. That's actually not that many signatures. In fact, that was an e-petition. If you look at the past petitions in years past, they used to get millions, sometimes 2 million signatures, but they weren't e-petitions. So how did they get so many signatures, you're probably wondering? Well, it's because they had community, they had churches, they got around each other. They had a social fabric where they all looked out for each other and they looked out for their common man. It's what we call the Anzac spirit in Australia. And that was what was demonstrated in the world wars. We've lost that. And on top of that, we've actually lost our knowledge about how our society works, how the cogs of government works. But this pandemic has been a rude awakening to people. They realize that if you're not interested in politics, politics is certainly interested in you. And the very people that have their hands on these grimy cogs in our government, it's been laid bare what they've been doing, with whether it be funding, whether it be how they use your vote against you. It's been absolutely disgusting. And when you look at how to combat that, a lot of people don't actually know how to even move forward with that. Most people that contact me and follow my channel, they generally want certain things out of the pandemic to be over. They don't want to see lockdowns. They don't want to see their kids getting jabbed without consent. They don't want to be losing their job because they need to be jabbed due to a mandate. They don't want to see jabbed passports or health passports, as you know them in the UK. They want free travel across their borders, which is their constitutional right in Australia. So in order to achieve that, I've been trying to arm a lot of Australians with a lot of different skills. First off, understanding how legislation gets passed, how government officials can be contacted, whether it's petitions, emails, calls, and also how to vote them out. And that's the most important thing. Recently, I came out with an episode which Andy referred to before. It's called Plan B. It's a segment where I referred to how we can actually change and get the outcomes that I just listed. Plan B is all about putting the power back into your hands. 2022 in Australia is a year of elections. We've got 2 state elections and 1 federal election. The federal election's in May. That's where we're going to decide whether we want our new prime minister or not. Now, the great thing about Australia is you don't have to be the guy with the prime minister to get what you want. There's this thing called the balance of power. So in the UK, in Canada, and in Australia, we have what we call a parliamentary democracy. In Australia, we have 151 lower house seats, and we have over 50 Senate seats, which is the upper house. In the lower house, if no side, the left-wing party or the right-wing party, gets more than 50% of the seats, what's created is there's this balance of power in the middle. Whoever holds those seats can shift the country in a radically freedom direction or even a radically tyrannical direction. So over the course of the last few elections that I've followed in Australia, that's been the big goal of a lot of these freedom parties that are advocating for those freedom policies on the jab, on the lockdowns, and government getting out of their lives. They've been trying to capture this balance of power in the lower house, but also, if they can, in the Senate as well, the upper house. This election in Australia, the federal election, is going to be one of the most fascinating I've ever seen. I can't wait to see how Australians vote, and I think it'll be a really interesting one to break apart. So how can Australians make a change? How can we, do this? This is where we've come from. Where are we going? Well, as the head of Turning Point Australia, the organisation I run, I try to give them a lot of solutions. Now, we've run through a lot of things to now, and we've gotten a lot of results. But this year is all about elections. And part of the thing that I'm bringing out is how to vote cards. How to vote cards are like recommendation cards where we can tell you how to vote, how the preference system works, and which parties are advocating for policies that you want on freedom. That's one of the things that I really think that's going to really help change the country. With Australians, they are fed up with government in their lives. I made a prediction in August last year. I said there's going to come a day when the majority of people that are protesting are vaccinated. I think we're getting pretty close to that. There's a lot of Aussies, they were promised a lot of their freedoms back as if the government was allowed to take them in the first place. And now they're in a situation where they're like, no, all those promises you made, you went back on. So when it comes to, the democracy in Australia, I'm really interested to see how these elections go. The important thing that all Australians need to do is start reading up about the candidates in their area. Start looking at which party you want to join. Every single person that's an adult should join a party. You don't have to go to weekly meetings, it's about engaging in your democracy. We've got so much lost ground over the last 40 years we need to make back up. And this is our opportunity this year. We're not going to form government. There's about 12 freedom parties that like those policies I listed before. They're not going to form government. That's the thing we all need to recognize. But what they can do is capture that balance of power, which I referenced before. So no matter if Labor, the left-wing party, or Liberal, the right-wing party, win, those freedom candidates will hold either government accountable. And that's what we need to do. I want to thank you guys for listening to that. It is the brief sort of version. There are some more videos on my channel if you can check out as well, where I explain this more in depth. But I've got a lot of projects coming up this year, like the PragerU sort of animations, and also like the infographic sort of shows, which will explain how your democracy works in Australia. I'm really looking forward to empowering you to make sure that you have an understanding of how your democracy works. And so at this point, I think we're doing a Q&A.
Absolutely, we are.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for that, Joel.
No worries. I didn't want to go too heavy on that, but I think people get the general gist.
Yeah, absolutely, and we love those references too. But where do you think we're going from now, Joel, in terms of the election that's coming up around the corner? How are people going to make a difference in terms of voting? Have you got your voting cards coming out?
Yeah, I do. We can't actually bring them out right now because the election gets called 6 weeks before election day. So it'll most likely be called in April. 2 weeks after that, we'll have the closing date for candidates to say they're running. So we might not have these how to vote cards till a month out from election day. And that's just, it's pretty much the Prime Minister's call when the election happens.
Yeah. And how do you think we've handled ourselves over the last 2 years? I mean, when you look back as a big picture sort of look at everything, how have we handled ourselves as Australians?
Well, it's been very enlightening. I mean, the Prime Minister successfully turned the country into a country of snitches. People turning on each other, people, dobbing each other into the authorities. That July 24th protest, which I was covering in last year, the amount of people that put in complaints about me was possibly, I think it was in the hundreds. There were 5,000 complaints made against people. People calling out their loved ones, people calling out their workmates. I mean, that's what the country's done. And it's really strange because it's like we're about to go to war. We're on the brink of World War III. It's like, do you really want to be in a situation where your fellow man, might stab you in the back in the middle of a war? Right. That's what the Prime Minister's done. And this is the thing, the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, he didn't do this. It's not actually his fault. But the problem is, as the Prime Minister of Australia, he has been apathetic. He's stepped back. He has not actually been engaging in his democracy, and he's left it to the tyrannical, in America, you'd know them as governors, but we call them premiers, who have been running roughshod over people's individual freedoms. And so the Prime Minister has lost his mandate to govern. And I think that the problem is now, we're without a leader in Australia, and it is time for an election. So I'm here for it.
And we've been seeing it through like the way that the other day he did an interview. I can't remember who it was with, but he had his wife there and they were showing them cooking curry. And it was just kind of like, what is going on here? Like, it's like they're trying to say, oh, well, ScoMo, he's so unpopular, but look at Jenny. She's not that bad. Guys, focus on Jenny. Am I seeing things correctly? They're just pulling out all the stops to try and make him look half decent right now.
They're desperate when they pull out Jenny. I mean, people fell in love with Jenny in the last election. Look, Jenny's a lovely lady. She's great. I've got no problem with it. But eventually, if you do it too much, it looks like you're hiding behind your wife. And when it comes to being a leader of a free country, look at Donald Trump. He never hid behind Melania. That was never a thing. He was a leader. He was ready to get a blood nose. He was ready to burst through that door. I think that it's really funny because you see when Anthony Albanese does a photo shoot with his dog, Scott Morrison does a photo shoot with his dog, you can literally go to their Instagram profiles. You'll see they're posted on the same day. And it's so funny because it's like, you can't do that anymore. Like, we see through the crap. Like, the Aussies are waking up and they're seeing how their democracy works. They traveled across the entire continent to be in Canberra to tell you off. They couldn't wait till the election. I mean, things are changing in this country, and it's not just Australia, it's happening around the world.
Do you reckon ScoMo should have gone and went to the ground level? He should have gone out at Canberra and maybe not walked amongst the people because it can be a bit dangerous. But Pauline Hanson was there. She was amongst the people. Senator Malcolm Roberts was amongst the people. I don't see why, if you're the Prime Minister, you can't come out and just talk to people one-on-one or at least address the 100,000 people that have gathered to go and to protest you.
If I was advising the Prime Minister on that particular day, I would say, do not go out to the people. Do not. But this is the thing. The goal is to eventually be able to go out to the people. But the problem is the Prime Minister's, the most he'd engage with the protesters is by answering a question from a reporter about the protests. That's the most. We get a sentence. That's it. The utter disrespect for 200,000 people minimum traveling to Canberra from across the continent is utterly despicable. If I was advising him, I'd say, Prime Minister, you need to bring out, you need to court some of these people that are in the freedom movement. namely Graham Hood, who's someone who, he doesn't have a political agenda. He's not someone that has a political party. He just wants those policies, which I mentioned before, freedom from being jabbed, freedom from lockdowns, freedom of travel, freedom from passports. And so by courting someone like that and then saying, you know what, there's votes in this, I've got to recapture my base. This is the new direction. This is the pitch I'm taking to the election. And once you start to win back the people, then you can go out to the people and engage with them. See, Pauline Hanson, it's easy for her to say, I went out to the people, because she was fighting for us. She did bills that tried to protect us. She put a Senate bill up last year, and 5 senators from the government actually voted for it. The Prime Minister can't say the same. He's been missing in action. And that is not what a leader does. A leader, as defined by some, is someone who uses all that they are to unite everyone to achieve good. That's Ricardo Bossi's definition. I think that when it comes to the Prime Minister, he's got to check himself. He's the leader of our country, and he's not doing anything.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. I've got a couple of questions around the churches at the moment. I know that you're Christian, and we've had Pat Mesiti on earlier, who's been preaching and really, I guess, getting the word out there. He voiced his disappointment with the lack of effort from churches, etc. What's your point of view on a lot of the preachers and churches out there not really standing up during this time?
No, I totally agree. I mean, it really is a crisis of leadership in the entire country. The church is no different. Believe it or not, there's actually no separation of church and state in Australia. When it comes to, there's not meant to be. When it says there's a secular, we have a secular society. When that was written down back when the word was created, it didn't mean secular, like separated. It means that you still get your morals from your Christian upbringing. And this is something you should ask Dr. Stephen Shavura about. I think he's talking later on today, around 4 or 5. He taught me this. He taught me that in Australia, just because we say we're secular doesn't mean you don't weigh in on it. You don't just stand by when abortion's happening if you believe it's wrong. You don't just stand by, when your congregation is suffering, when your congregation isn't even able to meet. You don't just sit in silence. That's not what a leader does. I think this is a great correction with the church as well. A lot of people have returned back to what the original church was doing after Jesus died, where they were doing Bible studies in their homes. It's very simple. If the media doesn't do their job, people like you and me, we replace them. If the political parties don't do their job, we have freedom parties that replace them. If teachers in schools and the schools aren't doing their job and they're indoctrinating the kids about COVID, they'll be replaced with homeschooling. The same goes for the churches. If they don't correct this, it's already happening. People are moving away from the churches. They're going to home Bible studies. In fact, it's actually a lot better because you get more face time.
Do you still go to church, Joel?
No, I haven't been to church since, how long has it been? I used to run 3 Bible studies in 2017. But no, I haven't been a regular churchgoer since then. More just Bible studies in the home setting. I found that it's a lot more rewarding. And see, the problem is when you go to a church, I'm not saying I've got Christian living down pat, how to be a good Christian, how to be Christ-like. I'm always trying to develop there. But there are a lot of other aspects of the Bible I want to develop my understanding a lot further and more in depth of. But I can't do that if I'm in a big congregation, because obviously, there's a lot of new people. And so I understand why things are the way they are, and that's why I prefer home church.
Absolutely. Maybe we were talking a little bit earlier, and we mentioned that we think you would be incredible in politics in your future. Is that on the cards for you? Have you thought about moving in to politics as a politician?
A lot of people ask me that. The reason why I haven't so far is because I used to be in political parties, and I unveiled a lot of corruption and nepotism that happened in them. And this was before the pandemic. This was a long time ago. I'll come out with the footage of that one day. But when it comes to my future, ask me again in 2 decades. I've got a lot to learn. I can tell people how to get results done. I can tell them what the government's doing. But in terms of life experience, I've still got a lot to learn still, especially on my economics. I want to brush up on my economics before I start doing these broad-based sort of solutions. Like, we got to revamp the whole system. We got to abolish capitalism. Like, I don't want to go there until I can give sound economic advice. So I do want to brush up on a lot of that. And I think that's a lesson to a lot of people, especially on the left, who are like, yeah, we should get into politics and do this, do that, do climate change. And it's like, hang on, have you actually read into it? Have you actually really gone in depth? And I couldn't seriously say, yeah, guys, I'm going to put my hand up to tell you how to run your businesses and how to revamp the tax policy. I don't think I'm ready for that.
I thought your hair was about to turn blue there for a second, Joel, when you started saying abolish capitalism.
Yeah, you got to be careful, mate.
Yeah, you do. But I definitely could see you going into a career in politics in the future, and I think that you speak really well, you present really well, and you know your stuff. And I'm interested to know where you actually got that from. Like, who did you listen to? I know you're a big fan of John Anderson because you've referenced him a few times. So do you listen to his podcast a lot? And who are the guys that you go to learn from?
Yeah, I do. I do. I didn't get my speaking from John, and I didn't get. I got most of my understanding from the intellectual dark web and people like John Anderson and Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, all those legends in America and the UK. Nigel Farage, absolutely phenomenal teaching. Great. He's excellent. But in terms of the actual speaking skills, I got it from a young age. Actually, I went to a very good school, the same school as John Anderson, actually. And from a very young age, even kindergarten, we were forced to go up and speak in front of our classes. And there was that. But there was also I did a lot of music, hence the cello in the background. That's actually harder than giving a speech. It's because if you start sweating and you start shaking, you're playing the instrument. It's like you can stuff up easily. But I did a lot of drama in school. Did a lot of public speaking. The biggest speech I actually did before the 24th of July was in front of 1,500 people in Year 6. It was like a speech day thing, and I was very young, but I did a 10-minute speech back then. So this isn't like I'm very used to giving public speeches and doing public speaking with that. It's like he stuffs up as he's explaining why he's a good speaker. But no, look, it's a muscle we need in society, and something my dad taught me as well, because I used to be a lecturer for the Sydney Institute for Christian Studies, which was an organization my dad set up as well in 2011. So from a very young age, 13, 14 years old, I've been doing a lot of lectures on that as well. The change from that into politics was seamless, because once you've got the public speaking skill, all you need is that box of knowledge, which the intellectual dark web really just provided. And once you're confident on what you're speaking about, and you've already got no nerves, or you're very refined with speaking, then it's like, okay, you can do anything. And I think that's the power of what Jordan Peterson taught. If you want to be more articulate, you need to write every day. If you want to if you can speak and you can write, then you are absolutely unstoppable. That's what Jordan Peterson says. So I've got a lot of brushing up to do on my writing as well.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson's great like that. He's really inspired me as well. And in terms of international political commentators and voices, is there anybody I tried to press you on this last time we did an Instagram Live, but you wouldn't give me too much details. But what's coming up for TP Oz? Do you have any collaborations coming up with overseas political commentators? Are you going to do a podcast with Charlie Kirk anytime soon and really fly the flag?
I do have a lot of plans for Turning Point. I've actually been spending the last 2 months briefing some of the closest supporters of my work on what's going ahead. And they're very excited. We've got about 20 projects this year, which I don't have time to reference. It takes me about an hour or two to run through it. But no, we are going to start doing a lot of stuff with the Americans. I can't wait to be doing stuff with Charlie and Candace and some of the other massive names out there. And they will be. I consider it an airstrike for the Aussies when an American tunes in. And so, look, I promise you, we'll be bringing that very soon. It all comes with a new studio, and that's not this place. This is more my Dan Bongino sort of set. We're actually building 2 new studios. One's going to be in Queensland, one's going to be in New South Wales, because we've got a lot of war room sort of style podcasts which are coming, like the Steve Bannon podcast. And yeah, look, we'd love to have you on in Queensland when that happens. But there's a lot of new talent that's coming in. I've really helped sort of to drive Turning Point, building it off my existing following. But very soon we'll be starting to diversify it with former parliamentarians and some people with real life experience, so we can keep driving this. Because Turning Point Australia, it's not a Joel Jammal thing. It's a life of its own.
Very true, mate. We are very excited to see where you take things. Joel Jammal, you've been phenomenal. I want to say a huge thank you for joining us, the Global Freedom as we receive.
Thanks so much, guys. Cheers.
Thank you, my friend.
See you, Joel. Take care.